Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I wanted to talk about some of our client success stories. And in particular, I wanted to focus on some of our Canadian client success stories because we've had an increasing number of Canadian clients from the Great White North expressing an interest in temporary residency in the US or perhaps permanent residency. And a question that often comes up is, have you worked with Canadians before? And how did it work out? And what was their background? So we put together a short collage here of a number of success stories involving our Canadian clients. In this episode, we're going to talk about E-2 Canadian clients and show to you, some real life stories of the people and their backgrounds and what they were doing and why they made the transition, and see if that resonates with you, and show you that, you're not alone in looking at this, and there's people that have gone before you and done it successfully. So the first client, I suppose we should use, pseudonyms or just keep them anonymous. I have one woman, she's a business owner in Ontario, had a very successful and still has a very successful dog breeding facility. And I think she actually has numerous facilities there. And she actually was kind of a pioneer in that she had come up with a unique dog breed that I think she was the first one to do it. And so very unique, very in demand, very popular. And she successfully developed her business in Canada. Now, like a lot of Canadian business people, the majority of her clients were based in the US. So the US was a huge, huge part of her business. And a year or two ago, I can't remember when, the US implemented some restrictions on importing dogs into the US that were less than 6 months. Even, I think they put a complete ban on them, or they severely restricted the importation of small dogs younger than 6 months. And that was a big problem for her because she was raising puppies, and then she would have clients in the US. They'd bring the puppies to the US and stuff like that. And that was very difficult for her. So she set about developing a facility here and then having an employee or employees come over here so that they could actually kind of relocate at least part of the business to the US to get around these importation. So she actually purchased a property in upstate New York. So it was relatively close to the border, I think maybe an hour and a half, maybe less from the border. Also, obviously in US territory, and would allow her to successfully develop and ramp up her business for her American clients. The interesting structure that she did is that, unlike most of our clients, she was not the first applicant for the E-2. How the E-2 usually works, the vast majority of the cases, although there are exceptions, is our client as an individual opens up or buys the business here in the US. And then as a result of that, they apply for the E-2 visa since they're the primary majority investor in the business. And that's usually how it's done, probably I'd say 90% of our clients. What she did was she had the Canadian company be the owner of the US company. And you can do that as well, assuming that the beneficial ownership of the Canadian company is Canadian, that we can show the majority owner of the Canadian company is a Canadian individual or individuals. So she had the Canadian company be the owner of the US company. And when you structure an E-2 like that, the beauty of it is the main investor doesn't necessarily have to be the first applicant for the E-2. You can send over actual employees to come over to launch up without having the actual investor get an E-2. And so that's what she did. We worked with her on getting her first employee, an essential employee who was going to help launch all these operations here in the US. Because how it works at the embassy is when you go to the embassy, you register the US company with the consulate. And then so once it gets registered, they say, okay, we see here's this US company, ABC. They've been registered at the consulate for E-2 visas. And once you get that registration, it makes it a lot easier to do subsequent E-2s. So whether a client herself wants to get an E-2 in the future, or she has other essential employees, she has to come over here. The process is much faster, more streamlined, and less expensive to have these subsequent employees once you get that first initial registration at the embassy. So I'll repeat it again. If the investor is the owner, they have to if the investor, him or herself, is the owner, that person has to get the E-2 visa first before they can invite over employees. But when you have the foreign company be the owner of the US company, then there's no restrictions in terms of the order, who comes first, stuff like that. So hopefully this was a nice overview of how you can do E-2 for Canadians, and stay tuned for other updates and interesting case studies about our successful clients.